All right, what's up, everyone? It is Brandon here again for another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I went beyond basic bitch Buddhism. And also, the whole point of this is kind of how could you as well go beyond this? But also, I just like talking about my own self and my journey. Who doesn't, right? Anyway, so um, I feel like the first 5 to 7, maybe even 8 years of my spiritual path, meditating, trying to awaken, like not like the new age kind of hipster word awaken. I mean like in the literal Eastern religious, Eastern spiritual forms of awakening. Um, we're talking about Nibbana, Nirvana, which I didn't really learn that much about until later on, which is what we're going to get into, is kind of when I started to get into the real teachings of Buddhism. But either way, I wanted to awaken. I learned about Taoism. I learned about Hinduism, different forms of Hinduism, Buddhism, heard some about it. It's like you could hear Alan Watts talk about something and feel like you kind of know what Buddhism is. And I've realized now, like, you could listen to Alan Watts talk for, multiple years and listen to other pop culture icons kind of talk about Eastern spirituality, and you'll still miss out on what it's actually about. And today we're specifically talking about Buddhism. So let's get started. First off, what is basic bitch Buddhism? You've probably heard the term basic bitch. It's really just like, someone who follows the cultural norms, I would say, pretty closely, maybe tries to fit in, maybe tries to be popular, maybe drinks at Starbucks. Although nowadays, maybe when I first heard the term basic bitch, it was Starbucks, but now I feel like it's some hipster coffee shop you've never heard of, is where that person, drinks their coffee now. Or maybe they've gone beyond coffee to like that mud water stuff that you see advertised online. Anyway, let's go. Let's get started on the real content of this. So, basic bitch Buddhism. I was involved in this. I didn't realize that I was involved in this. I thought I knew what Buddhism was. And even though I had kind of studied around it and studied Eastern teachings for, the better part of a decade, I still had no clue what it was. And really, this all changed on May 28th, 2021, which was when I had, some experiences or what you could call an attainment that felt and looked and seemed a whole lot like cessation in Buddhism. Now, this some people describe as an experience that can be lined up perfectly with what the attainment of the first level of permanent awakening is in the view of Theravada Buddhism. Not everyone agrees with that definition or that way of viewing this attainment. But anyway, there are some people who view it that way. And when I went through this experience, for lack of a better word, when I went through this experience, the only thing that came to mind as a reference point to even describe what it could be like, I had heard one person in like maybe a couple times throughout my whole spiritual path up to then, maybe 7 or 8 years, being pretty diligent and pretty focused on this stuff. I'd only really heard one person talk about cessation, and that was Frank Yang. So I went and I kind of looked, I was like, cessation, for some reason, what I just experienced brought me to what he described. So in my mind, that's the only thing I could really think was close to what I had just gone through. So I went back and I watched some of Frank videos that were on that topic or that had to do with that topic in part. So I watched those and then I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. And then Frank Yang's talking about someone he learned from. He read a book, Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. So then I read that book. And, whether I was in, an arising and passing away insight stage, I had like my A&P event, whether that is what took place. And if you don't understand the jargon, that's okay. We're going to get into other like less jargony stuff here in just a minute. I'm just describing the kind of story, how it happened. So I have this crazy, attainment thing. Experience seems to stop entirely um, a couple times for me in the span of a few minutes, which, to be fair, it does kind of line up with the description of, the A and P unknowing events as well. But anyway, the first time that this ever happened to me, the only thing I could really think about was I had heard the word cessation before. I look it up, I go read into the sources that I can find on it, and it seems like that might have been what happens, but the sources are all coming from Buddhist sources. Now, it's not that this attainment or event is only described in Buddhist sources. It's actually described fairly well in forms of Hindu traditions. But anyway, so the clearest descriptions I ever found were in Buddhist forms. And it just kind of got me looking in deeper into what Buddhism was actually about, what this attainment might or might not be, what I could be going through, like what kind of shift in my awakening process just happened. Because for better or worse, whether that was a true cessation or true stream entry, however you want to define it, if that was my first real permanent attainment of, awakening, whether you wanted to define it that way or not, my experience has never been the same since that happened. My kind of just the sensitivity I have to just the sensate phenomena that's here right now. I have like a much better resolution, you could say. I can see much greater detail. I am better able to meditate and actually kind of get results when I meditate. A lot of changes have happened. We're over 3 years after that event, and I would say whatever we want to call the event in and of itself, it has had lasting changes. It had sort of, to me, it felt like exponential changes very quickly, and it led to, a transformative process that lasted years and years and still isn't done. It still seems like it's still kicking. The aftershocks of that initial event are still, part of what's creating the spiritual shifts and different states of consciousness that I go through now. Like, they all tie back into that one moment. Even though now I've been, trying to become awakened or becoming awakened for like 10 years, that event stands out as one of the clearest moments throughout my entire path that made a difference. So no matter what, it's an important time for me when that happened. And it just makes sense that, that event, the context that I understood it within, that became a part of my path ever since. And that's a big reason why I've really dove deeper and deeper to the best of my abilities within the Buddhist framework, trying to understand it, trying to practice within it. So anyway, that was my initial taste. That was how I got beyond basic bitch Buddhism the first time. That's how I took the initial dive. That's how I found the sources that actually tried to describe the Buddhist teachings in better detail. They actually got clear on what Buddhism is. So now I'm going to literally tell you ways to go beyond basic bitch Buddhism right now. And how's that going to happen? I'm going to tell you the true fundamentals of Buddhist practice, mainly the things that you need to start out with and you need to understand if you want to have any hope of actually progressing in this path. So, we will start out. I've heard it taught that the teacher who taught me this way of describing it directly was Nirodha. He has many teachings on YouTube. He has many discussions with his students, and he posts plenty of them online, tons and tons of them online. He's a great resource. So that is spelled Dhammarado, Dhammarado, one word. So if you want to look into his teachings further, you can look him up now. His YouTube channel has plenty and plenty for you to learn. So the way that Dhammarato describes Buddhism most succinctly is it's basically two phrases, two terms that oppose each other. There is dukkha and dukkha nirodha. Dukkha and dukkha nirodha. However you want to pronounce dukkha. I think it's more like dukkha, but you know, I'm only on the first level of learning the Pali language course online right now. So maybe when I get to level 4, I will know even better how to pronounce dukkha. Let's move on. So what is dukkha? Dukkha, you often hear translated as suffering. It also is translated as stress, anxiety, dissatisfaction, maybe very loosely as pain, but it's essentially the things that you don't like in life, the things that you unequivocally feel bad about, more or less. You do not like it when dukkha arises, chances are. And maybe that's one of your greatest problems in life, is that you have a problem with dukkha. And dukkha nirodha, what does the word nirodha translate to? By the way, these are Pali words. The language spelled P-A-L-I. That was the language that the Buddha taught in back in India, the time that he was living. Nirodha means cessation. Now, Nirodha is not necessarily talking about the attainment sort of experience thing that I'm describing that may or may not have happened to me on May 28th, 2021 for the first time. Or at least it was the first time that I truly noticed it, if that's when it happened. Anyway, Nirodha can basically be said as translating to the word cessation, which is really just saying the end of something, or something is ceasing for a time being, something is not present for the time being. So we are saying the Buddhist teachings, the whole Buddhist path, can be described in the most simple, succinct way as being dukkha, realizing and seeing that there is a, maybe you could say, self-created problem within reality. We have something that we don't want, dukkha. That's basically the driving force between everything we don't want in reality, more or less. And we have that. We all know, we feel it in our bones, literally. We feel dukkha every day, and some teach and say in every instant. We feel suffering, we feel distress, we feel stress, anxiety, dissatisfaction, things not being perfectly happily ever after forever right now, nor every single moment in the future. The lack of perfection undeniably in our experience in every moment, that is also kind of what dukkha is. So we know that there's something a little bit amiss with our lives on planet Earth. We know that it's not all exactly perfect. You can feel that right now. There's that, little itch on your left toe right now or whatever. You probably didn't have an itch, but when I mentioned that, you probably paid attention more to your left toe, which I didn't mention which toe. Maybe you thought your left big toe. That's what I thought, and all I said was toe. But anyway, we could move our awareness and give some attention to the left big toe right now, and just scanning within that one area of our body. If we look there long enough, we'll probably find something that doesn't feel quite right or good about it. But beyond that, there's somewhere in your body that you're feeling dis-ease right now. Maybe the lunch that you had isn't agreeing with you, or if it's breakfast time or dinner time. You might feel a little bit of just queasiness in your stomach. You might feel tiredness behind your eyes. You might have a bit of a light headache that you didn't notice until now when you heard me say that. Who knows? There's something about your experience right now that isn't actually entirely perfect. And that you could equate more or less to being something like dukkha. So I would just say, in a very simple note, you know what I'm talking about when I say dukkha. I would hope so. It's the stuff that you don't like all the way. Dukkha Nirodha. There's an end to that stuff that you don't like. Not only is there an end to every specific instance of dukkha, like you have that headache right now, maybe tomorrow your headache is entirely gone. You could say that one specific instance of dukkha is experiencing the ceasing of itself. It is gone. But more so, what the Buddhist teachings are talking about is that there is a way to end dukkha entirely. And now there is the specific instance of this all ending at once. Your whole entire experience ending for a little moment, usually. And that's what I'm talking about with that attainment of cessation. That's said to be your first taste of what you could say is ultimate reality in Buddhism. That's one way of describing it. When you reach that attainment of cessation, you see that your entire experience, all the suffering, every last bit of potential suffering in it can leave. And the only way that can really leave initially is that you see that your experience can actually cease. Your experience as a human being can cease. And there's not even consciousness during that ceasing. That's another thing that ceases. Consciousness is not permanent. That's one basic teaching within Buddhism, is that consciousness is not permanent. At least in early Buddhism, it's very clear consciousness is not some permanently existing fancy thing like other forms of spirituality might, pronounce. Anyway, so there is that potential to step beyond the world of suffering entirely for just a glimpse. And that can be said to be someone's first taste of being fully out of suffering, of dukkha nirodha, in the most sort of clear sense, at least at the beginning. The whole Buddhist path beyond that is practicing to where you can bring that experience of zero suffering, entirely zero suffering, into a sustained way in which you live every moment. And that would be the life of an arahant, the life of a fully enlightened or fully awakened person by the definition of the Buddha. So, moving on, that is the simple way of describing the Buddhist path. There's suffering, there's an end to suffering. The Buddhist path is about teaching you how to find the end of suffering. Real quick, we will do a little dive into the Four Noble Truths, as this is a cornerstone part of Buddhism as well. And as we will see, this lines up perfectly with Dhammarado's succinct description of dukkha and dukkha nirodha. So, the first noble truth, there is dukkha in the world, life, and experience. We've already kind of described that. You can find suffering in your life. You can find stress or anxiety or dissatisfaction. You can find not absolute perfectness somewhere in your world. And at least by your own personal definition, right? And then noble truth number 2, there is a cause for this dukkha. Now, what is this cause? This cause is craving. This cause could be said also to be desire. If you as an individual entity, let's say me, Brandon Rowe, let's say I crave, I desire, I enjoy sushi. And if I bring to my awareness and attention right now the concept of sushi, and then I think about the greatest tasting sushi ever, and then I also notice at the same time I'm a little bit hungry. I have a craving now, even ever so slight, because I'm kind of, manufacturing this craving for sushi for the sake of speaking about it, but there is a little bit of sense now that I can have of, dang, I kind of want delicious sushi, but I don't have it right now. this is a little form of what this craving would be like. It's you wishing reality were a certain way in which it is not presenting to you right now. That's the issue. That you have a craving or desire that does not line up perfectly with reality. And that disconnect between your desire, your craving, and reality is where dukkha comes into play. That is how dukkha comes about. Now, craving also describes, in a sense, you could say, the craving for something not to be. Let's say you're a prisoner and you're in shackles, you're in handcuffs. You can have the craving to be free of handcuffs. That is also a craving. That is also a desire. But you could also describe it as the aversion to handcuffs. You do not like handcuffs. You do not want to be in handcuffs. You want to be away from handcuffs. You want to experience the opposite of the feeling and experience of handcuffs. So that is another way that we can describe craving. It can go in both the positive direction. I crave sushi. I crave something I want. I desire something I want. Or I desire to be free of something because I dislike something. And that's kind of the negative, you could say, direction of craving. They both work. And if you're able to examine your experience very closely and accurately, you will find, especially before going down any real amount of spiritual practice, you'll easily find that there are many things that you crave, and even in one moment, you're probably craving multiple different things, and also having an aversion to multiple different things. Like me right now that I've sort of paid attention just a little bit to my experience, I've moved my attention a little bit beyond what I'm speaking and talking to you. I can feel there is like a little bit of a tiredness or on edge, almost headachy type of sensation, in my head right now. And I'm not fully in love with that feeling. There is a bit of aversion, I would say, to that feeling, or even a bit of craving for a more tranquil type of bodily sensation in that head region. Something I would want that's a little bit more peaceful, a little less on edge, a little, So that's pretty much craving. That's the second noble truth, that there is a cause to suffering, there's a cause to dukkha. That is craving. 3, the third noble truth, there is an end to dukkha. We describe this with the dukkha Nirodha, also the attainment of cessation, meaning, the end experience kind of blinking out of reality for a second, experience ending for a second. For a practitioner, a spiritual practitioner can see experience stop, and with the stopping of the entirety of their experience, of their awareness, everything stops. They see that as a necessity, suffering also stops, because suffering is part of their experience. Suffering exists within your direct experience right now. Without direct experience, there cannot be suffering. Anyway, that's the third noble truth. There is an end to dukkha, end to suffering. Noble truth number 4. The Noble Eightfold Path taught by the Buddha is the way, or is at least a way, out of dukkha. It is a way to end suffering. So the path, the teachings taught by the Buddha do work to get out of dukkha. They work to end dukkha, to end suffering. That is what the fourth noble truth describes. So again, all of this was kind of described in the very succinct description given by Dhammarato in his teachings that I came in contact with. But this is a little bit of more deliberation, And as you'll find, if you study much into Buddhism, there are many different kind of systems of things being by number, things being listed out clearly. That's one of the things that I love about Buddhism as a spiritual tradition, is it can be very precise and clear and spell things out, where other spiritual traditions might have many things kind of hush hush under the rug, not described, not taught, but still present within their tradition. I'm not very much a fan of traditions that do not teach what they are about, that are afraid to express explicitly what is going on. So that is one of the things I love about Buddhism is there are many distinct, clear examples and descriptions of things. And as we'll see, here is one more, the Noble Eightfold Path. So an 8-step sort of process to getting to the end of suffering. Now, as we'll see, and I want you to understand that the the Four Noble Truths, first off, it's not like these are happening linearly always, and that there's a clear, like, you're in this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and then you're done. No, like, they all, each of the points on these descriptions, like the Four Noble Truths or the Noble Eightfold Path, they're describing part of the process of awakening and part of the process of getting out of suffering. They're not always going to occur linearly much of the time. A step, like step number 5 on something, can occur before step number 1 does. Or for you to fully get in and understand and use step number 1, you might need to first get understanding of step number 6. So the steps are not in necessarily a particular order all the time. They can be more or less, but there's a bit of flexibility there. So I will add that. So now, what is the Noble Eightfold Path? What is the way in which the Buddha taught that we could get out of suffering in our own lives, that we could attain? Not for some monk in a cave a million miles away on some other planet. No. What did the Buddha teach that he taught that you as a human being could achieve, that you could fully awaken and overcome suffering? Okay, what is this path? This path is right understanding. That's basically a right view of reality. And when we say right, we don't necessarily mean right or wrong in some absolute sense. What right means in the Noble Eightfold Path is right is that which leads you away from suffering, that which allows you to find liberation from suffering. So the right understanding is that which leads you from suffering. So if someone has the understanding of, I have this really fixed personality and I must have sushi right now or I am not happy with my life, and I have no flexibility in this, and I will accept no compromise, and there's nothing greater in life that I could want, that I could be given other than sushi, and if I don't get sushi right now, I'm going to be angry, and that's how it's going to be. That is not the right understanding, okay? The right understanding would be more to view your reality right now and to see that you don't need your cravings to be fulfilled, and to understand that your specific cravings will actually never end suffering in and of themselves. Oh, I got to eat some really tasty sushi. Guess what? That might have calmed that one specific desire in my life for an instant, or for 5 minutes, or 10 minutes. But that's about all that it does. Using the phenomenal world, using the world of forms and ideas and feelings to try to pacify the process of craving is not the way that works. And that is why looking at the specific desires and trying to, oh, I want sushi, so I'm going to get sushi. Oh, I need to use the bathroom, so I'm going to use the bathroom. Like, This very normal day-to-day way of operating is not the way that you will overcome suffering, that you will liberate yourself from suffering. Right understanding in some ways can be said to start to understand that things are impermanent, the world is impermanent, that your personality, your sense of self, for me, my Brandon Rowe personality matrix thing, that has certain desires and has certain dislikes. If I put a bunch of importance onto this and truly believe that this is one fixed thing that doesn't change, and things must be the way that this specific thing wants them to be, I will forever be unhappy, because this Brandon Rowe personality thing has far less power than reality itself does. So right understanding could be said in a way to be understanding that things are impermanent. Also, your own personality is impermanent. Your own wants and dislikes are impermanent. There is no true fixed self that you even have. And if you begin to see through this self and see that it is not as fixed and is not as permanent as you have previously perceived it to be, once you can see through that illusion of yourself, you can begin to see eventually that your actual experience and reality itself are one thing, more or less. You can begin to dissolve this personality that has so many specific wants and dislikes. And it is actually this, more than a personality, it's this sense of self. It's subtle sensations of selfhood, of you being real, and you being a fixed thing that's tied into your beliefs about personality and wants and dislikes. If you can begin to dissolve this by looking clearly at your direct experience, you can see that reality and what you truly are one. There is no conflict between the two, and this is one way. This is part of the way that you begin to get a little bit more out of craving as time goes on, is furthering that realization. So that is just part of right understanding, but right understanding is basically understanding reality and seeing reality clearly, and seeing reality in the way that leads to less suffering, and eventually no suffering, is the teaching. Right intention. Basically, you have the intention to move forward on the Noble Eightfold Path. You have the intention to reach the ending of suffering. You have the intention to be kind and compassionate and not to generate more suffering for others in the world. Basically, you have the intentions that lead to the ending of your own suffering by following the path correctly, and then, you're not creating more suffering for others. It's quite simple, actually. Right intention, one way of understanding it. Of course, you can get into plenty more detail, way more than this video could ever describe, probably. And there's right speech. So step 3 of the Noble Eightfold Path, right speech. Basically, don't lie, don't gossip, don't do idle chatter, which is basically talking about nothing important for no reason, just to talk. Your words and your power of speech should be used for things that matter, and it should be used to create a better world rather than a negative world, rather than gossiping about, whoever you want to say, whatever name you want to say, gossiping about Timothy over there. His shoes were just totally not on point today. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha, Timothy. Your bad shoes. We all make fun of you. Okay, it's a dumb example, right? But you shouldn't be spending your time speaking about nonsense. You should spend your words on things that matter, such as the Dhamma, such as getting out of suffering. That's basically right speech. Right action, which also could be called right karma or right karma. Most of you have probably heard about the idea or the principle of karma, which is basically the principle of cause and effect. Karma actually ties in a lot with intention. And basically, when your intention is positive and is the type of intention to lead to good results, to lead to less suffering, that is naturally going to tie into you having actions that lead to less suffering. Having the intention to not gossip about other people and spread negativity about others, having that intention leads to you having the right way of speaking, where you're not lying about other people, where you're not spreading rumors and negativity and lies and hatred towards other people with your words. And then the right action is you actually end up acting positively. Maybe you act as a friend to that person, where in earlier in your life you would have had the wrong intention. You would have wanted to increase your own sort of status, social status. So around people who would talk negatively of one other person, you would join in the group and speak negatively about them as well, so that you could get a little bit more acceptance of this hateful group of people, which I don't know why you're concerned about anyway, but I guess that's just how social dynamics kind of work for many humans. So you could put someone else down to try to raise yourself up. That's one way, you could have the speech go wrong, right? And through action, you would probably also continue to do actions that wouldn't support this person who's outside the group, right? And maybe you would, maybe you would trip the kid at during recess or something, during. We can come up with whatever examples, really simple one. But yeah, right action, do the right thing. You know what that is. It's pretty simple. That's not one that we have to get too philosophical about. Really, you kind of know good intentions from bad intentions. Really, I think you do. I think you'd know speaking in a good way versus a bad way. Being truthful versus lying. Right livelihood. Making money or creating, making a living in a way that doesn't create more suffering in the world. Making a living in a way that doesn't exploit other people. Making a living doing an ethical form of business. Or being ethical in some way or another in order to support yourself instead of doing unethical things. Working, being part of a gang, and the way that you make a living for yourself and put food on your family's table is you murder other people. That is an example of not right livelihood, of bad livelihood. Being a saint who teaches about spirituality and you receive donations from people who benefited from your teachings. And through those donations, you can feed yourself and your friends a modest meals and not overspend on physical luxuries. Like, that is an example of right livelihood. Even in Buddhism, in the early texts, there's quite a bit of description of actually going out into homelessness. Not being forced into homelessness because you couldn't support yourself financially and you still were a greedy person and wanted things of the world, but instead going out into homelessness for the sake of getting away from the desirous world, from the world of human beings who are creating more suffering for themselves, moving into a path of homelessness where you're away from the 9-to-5 get money, spend money, consume type of lifestyle, all that. That was actually one part of right livelihood, or one way of living correctly that the Buddha actually taught. He spoke a lot about going forth into homelessness, going forth into basically being a Buddhist practitioner and practicing to end suffering for yourself and for others. That being your primary focus, and getting away from the sort of regular human process of I must make money, I must spend money, all of that. Like, Anyway, that's one example of right livelihood. But basically, any way that you can ethically support yourself financially, support your family financially. Um, an example would be maybe a construction worker. They build things that the world needs. They build let's say they fix a road that thousands of people travel on with their cars every day to get where they need to go. They fix that road. They aren't angry at their coworkers when they fix that road. They're helpful to their coworkers when they fix that road. They teach their coworkers the skills to also do that. It goes beyond just the action, the plain common action of what you do for a living, but also the method in which you make a living. So you could do a form of making a living that is generally seen as a wholesome way of making money. Like you could be an accountant and just help people file their taxes, all that kind of stuff. But you could be a positive accountant who is really helpful to other people, who helps brighten others' days, who helps brighten other people's time on this earth. You are a positive force. Or you could be an accountant and you're always angry and you're always upset and you yell at your clients when they make a mistake or when they didn't tell you what you needed to know to do your job right. There are ways to do a type of making a living in which it still could be negative. So that is something to keep in mind too. The sort of and again, here we come into the intention. If you have the intention to be a positive force in this world, and you control your speech so that you're not negative and hateful towards others in your speech, and you do actions that support others rather than undermine others, and it all ties into it. So all of these steps do support each other. Now we have 6, right effort. Right effort can be described as effort that is going to move you away from suffering, that also is going to help others from being in suffering. Wrong effort could be described as succumbing to your negative state of mind and becoming very angry and hateful, and then spreading that hate and that hateful energy to those around you. I feel like we are all guilty of doing this from time to time, or at some point in our lives we had done this. So it's an important thing to watch out for. Right effort is saying, I can handle this moment right now with dignity and respect. I can be joyful and I can be grateful of what gifts I've been given in this moment. And I can use the positive aspects of this moment to cheer myself up so that I may then have a positive attitude in which I will rub off on others around me and help to brighten their days. They are in this world of samsara and suffering just as I am, and if I act as a positive force to even brighten their day just a little bit, that is far greater than creating any amount of negativity for them, because they are already going through a process which has inherent suffering, stress, anxiety, dissatisfaction, pain, etc. in it. So, knowing that they are in a very difficult place as well, I need to conduct myself well in a way in which I take myself out of my personal suffering so that I do not generate any suffering for those around me. That could be one way of understanding right effort. Right mindfulness. What is right mindfulness? Mindfulness, Dhammarato liked to describe this. So the Pali word for mindfulness is sati. S-A-T-I. Sati, mindfulness, in the Buddhist way can be described, he said, wake up and smell the coffee, I think. It was one way he said it. But basically, be present with what you're feeling now. Right mindfulness could be, let's say you're driving a car. Right mindfulness could be you're mindful of the sensations of your hands being connected to the steering wheel. You're feeling the way that your arms are moving and turning the wheel. You're feeling into your body. You're feeling and very present with the process and feeling the sensations of your foot pressing the gas or the brake pedals. You're very attentive to the visual phenomena happening that are showing you, okay, there's a stop sign coming up now. I'm very aware of this stop sign. I'm very aware that the light just turned green. I'm very aware of where my foot is positioned in space and exactly the pressure I need to apply to it to move forward in the right way. Like, it's very simple in a sense. Like, mindfulness is just having your mind full with the present moment. Mindfulness is not being distracted by storylines. You're not being distracted by some story of why you hate the moment you're in right now, and you're so caught up in the story of hating what's going on in your life right now that you are just numb to what even is happening in the moment, and you're not paying any attention. Someone could be hating their boss in one moment so much that when they're driving a car, they are not even present to what's going on, and the car is being driven entirely subconsciously, pretty much. And when this person is so hateful and angry, they're so caught up in their own negative storyline that they get in an accident, because they're not even able to stay present with the physical sensations occurring in their world at the time. And there are many important things we do throughout our days that require a lot of attention. Driving is one of them. Driving can be lethal if done incorrectly. We all know this. There are plenty of things that we can do in which we can harm ourselves and others by not paying attention to what is actually happening in the moment. I feel like plenty of you, if you're on a spiritual video talking about Buddhism this far along, you've probably come into contact with descriptions of what mindfulness is. So basically, be with the sensations of the present moment. Do not be caught up in storylines in your head, in imagination in your head, of the past or the future, or even if you are in a phase of imagination. Let's say you're a fiction writer, you write fantasy books, fantasy novels, and that is kind of your passion, that is what you're good at. A way of being in mindfulness could be being very present and involved with your visualization of the fictional world you're creating. So it's not only being in sort of physical sensations of the world, but it's also just being very, very aware of the moment in which you're in and paying attention to it. Right concentration. Some people, such as Dhammarato, do not like the word concentration in this sense because it can give Westerners the wrong understanding. Concentration in this sense is basically talking about forms of samadhi, forms of jhana, basically forms of advanced meditation. And these are states of meditation generally which are going to bring you further and further away from suffering. Some things which you could describe as being essentially right concentration or falling under the 8th step of the Noble Eightfold Path would be the Brahma Viharas, which are, the abodes of Brahma or the abodes of God, more or less, which, one of them is appreciative joy. Another one of them is, what is it? Why is this spacing on me right now? But anyway, let's go on the example of appreciative joy, just since that one came to mind. So appreciative joy, when you're in the state of mind where you are truly appreciative of something. Let's say you're appreciative of your father because of sacrifices that he made for you and maybe the man that he had become throughout the journey of his life, and you're paying attention to that and you're really appreciating that. In a sense, you're being grateful. Having a very grateful state of mind and your mind actually being absorbed entirely, more or less, in gratefulness, in appreciation, positive, joyous appreciation for something or someone. That is a safe, healthy state of mind in Buddhism. There's metta, loving kindness. That's like really the most common Brahma Vihara that's practiced in Buddhism, probably. In loving kindness, the sort of compassion, but loving kindness, being loving, having loving thoughts and kind thoughts, thoughts of generosity, wishing well for others, giving love to others and to the world. That's described as another safe state. It's a state of consciousness in which, if you are far enough into metta, to loving kindness, or far enough into this appreciative joy, if you are very far into these states of consciousness and very focused on these things, you will not be focused on hatred. You will not be focused on the lack within your moments. You will not be focused on your own suffering. You will instead be focused on something positive, something good, wholesome, and healthy. And that is what makes these states right concentration. You're concentrating on something that is not suffering, something that actually moves in the opposite direction of suffering. You're concentrated on something wholesome that moves purely in the direction of happiness and positivity, you could say, of benefit to yourself and other sentient beings. That is right concentration. The jhanas are also seen as right concentration. The jhanas are states that are free from the hindrances. In the jhanas, you're not concerned with greed or wealth or hatred of others. In the jhanas, you're not caught up in sloth and torpor, which is basically laziness, avoiding the moment you're in, not paying attention to the moment you're in. That's part of what sloth and torpor are mentioning. Like, you actually have some energy and attention to the moment you're in. That's one of the things that's inherent within the jhanas. But more or less, you can look at the states of right concentration as whatever state of meditation or spiritual practice that brings you to a positive moment where you are not focused on how your moment is bad or you don't have what you want in life, but instead to how great and beautiful the gift of life, the gift of the moment you're in is right now, how other beings deserve love, how other beings deserve your support and help. But basically, yes, you're having a state of mind that is so purely absorbed into positive, wholesome things that it is naturally something that leads you away from suffering. So that is a very broad brushstroke way you could understand right concentration. Okay, we have a lot more to get to in this video, so let's move on. How does the Noble Eightfold Path lead to the end of suffering? To understand this, it is helpful to understand the teaching of dependent origination. If you want to hear the Pali, that is Paticca Samuppada. Dependent origination is also described as the co-arising of things. Things arising dependent upon other aspects of reality. Reality does not happen with only one aspect arising. For experience itself to even occur, as it does for you in a human form, but even more broadly, going beyond human form and human reality and human perception. This is basically a framework of how reality arises within direct experience. And these are different elements of what arises, especially in human experience, which we are luckily in right now. We're not in some hell realm. We're human beings on the planet Earth. You're watching a YouTube video about Buddhist teachings to get out of suffering. I would say chances are that's a generous moment to find yourself in. You actually find yourself in a moment with some knowledge and opportunity to take your life in a positive direction. So be thankful for that. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here teaching some of this, relaying some of this important wisdom and information to you. So anyway, There are 12 links or 12 steps to dependent origination. Now, they're described as links, basically links in a chain. You can think of dependent origination as, a moment in your experience is this chain of 12 different links linked together. And as these links are here, they actually arise together in every moment you're in to give you the human experience you're experiencing right now. Without one of these links, you do not experience reality like you are now. And actually, in fact, like we described earlier with the attainment of cessation, with the instantaneous insight into the end and cessation of suffering, the temporary attainment of that, that can show you that when the first link, especially ignorance, is ended, that the suffering ends. The entire chain with all 12 links and your whole experience can end. That is your first glimpse. Now then you'll come back to the realm of suffering. You'll come back to your same body and your same mind, and you will see that suffering is still here, that you're still here very much in the same way, but you've had an insight that there is a way for suffering to change or end. It isn't a continuous thing. Suffering is not always here. So, let's move on. The first link in dependent origination is ignorance, otherwise known as avidya, which is, I'm going to read descriptions. These came from the Microsoft Copilot AI app. I'll probably go into descriptions of them of my own afterwards, but just to be succinct here, I will give you these quick descriptions and then we will talk more about them. So the first link, independent origination, is avidya, lack of understanding of the true nature of reality, leading to misconceptions and delusions. Okay, see that the first step in the Noble Eightfold Path actually lines up pretty much perfectly with this first link. So the first link in dependent origination, in your reality co-arising with other factors, the first step in dependent origination is actually you having wrong understanding. You seeing reality in the wrong way. And that's how reality arises with suffering. Because you have misconceptions, you have delusions into what reality is. And a lot of this is your personality view, your sense of self, deeming that reality should be a certain way through craving. This is how you get into suffering. But anyway, so that's an interesting point to note, the clear connection between the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path and the first link in dependent origination, paticca samuppada, the first link of ignorance or avidya. So, link number 2, formations or sankhara. Volitional actions and mental formations driven by ignorance. So, volitional, you are choosing these things. You have some bit of will and choice in these actions. These are volitional things. These are things of your choosing through karma, through cause and effect. You play a role in supporting this. That's kind of what volitional is meaning here. These are actions and mental formations driven by your ignorance, driven by you having an incorrect understanding of what reality is. You then begin to create the craving and clinging, but even beyond that, you create the intentions that create the bedrock for this world of craving and clinging and suffering to occur. Anyway, we will see that coming into play very quickly. So that was link number 2, formations. Link number 3, consciousness, vijnana, awareness or consciousness that arises due to formations. Formations mainly meaning mental formations. Sankhara, you could also see it as a bit of description of impressions. But basically your mental formations and impressions and intentions, you could even maybe link it a bit to the subconscious mind. Okay, link number 4, name and form, which is namarupa. The mind and body, or the mental and physical aspects of a being shaped by consciousness. Link number 5, the 6 sense bases, salayatana. The 6 faculties, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind that interact with the world. So you know very well of your 5 senses. Buddhism describes there being 6 senses, and it speaks about the mind and your mental sensations as being the 6th sense. So there's actually, it's not as kind of spooky as it sounds, having 6 senses. It actually makes perfect sense when you learn about it. Even now, as you hear about it, it's not that radical of a thing to view your mind as just another kind of category of sensation. So basically, your 5 physical senses plus your mental reality, all combined into one. So that is link number 5. So link number 4 is basically your body, and there's name, which is also your mind, your mental components. That was step 4. Going into link 5, 6 sense spaces. And then now link number 6, contact phassa. The contact between the sense faculties and their respective objects. So this is, let's say, my feeling of touch of body, right? Can touch this object right here. And because the body touches the object, which is rupa, form, because the body touches form, it has the ability to then have a sensation of what touching that form is. In the moment that the body touches the form and then I perceive it, I perceive that event happening, and it actually forms sensations within my experience. That's more or less the moment of contact. But anyway, the contact between the sense faculties and their respective objects. I think that makes sense to you. So, 7, feeling, Vedana. The sensations or feelings that arise from contact, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So, let's say I touch this stone and it feels very smooth, and I like the feeling of smooth things. It's actually kind of soft and silky. I enjoy touching that, and that's a pleasant feeling. So Vedana is described in a sense to be like the emotional world. But even more so, it's just, does something feel pleasant? Does something feel neutral, or does something feel negative? Okay, 8, craving, tanha. The desire or craving for pleasurable experiences and aversion to unpleasant ones. So we've been speaking around that topic on plenty of other aspects of this video, so you should have a good understanding of it by now. 9, clinging, upadana. The attachment and grasping at objects of craving. So clinging is when craving becomes intensified. As I gave the example earlier in the video of, I want to eat sushi. I have the desire to eat sushi. Let's say now I've waited 30 minutes and that thought has kind of ruminated in my mind, and now I notice I have, let's say I have contact with my bodily sense of hunger, and with that, then I have some mental formations and some thoughts that I would like to eat. I'm getting hungrier. And then I remember back to, oh, I was hungry and I wanted to have sushi just a bit ago. Now I really want sushi. Oh, I can't get my mind off of having this delicious sushi. I must have it. My moment right now is horrible because I don't have the sushi in my mouth. That's a very dramatized version of clinging. So basically, the craving becoming intensified. Link number 10 of dependent origination, becoming, bhava, the process of becoming or existence driven by clinging. So, in a sense, it could be the process of me birthing a next moment where I am just lost in the craving and clinging for sushi. And my whole moment has now just become focused on sushi, and I lose mindfulness of whatever it was that I was doing. Let's say I lose the concept that I'm even recording a video right now because I'm so enthralled with the passion of wanting to eat sushi. That in a sense could be one way of describing becoming. Like your clinging kind of leads to the becoming of a next moment, or the becoming, the birth, the existence of other aspects in reality which are going to be focused more around suffering, more around you noticing that the clinging has not been satisfied. Birth is link 11, jati, the arising of a new existence or birth. So step 10 is basically the process of that, the process kind of leading to the birth. 11, birth, jati, the arising of a new existence or birth. Some people might think about this in the sense of like birth, as in like an entire new entity is born, like Brandon Rowe was born on this date in this year, and like a human being was born. You could look at like that, but generally, from what I've seen and heard from other teachers, the 12 links of dependent origination are more referring to the birth of mind moments and more just your experience right now. You birth a new moment. You birth a new sort of state of consciousness in which you can either be free from a lot of clinging and be feeling quite good, or you could be lost in clinging and very angry and sad and upset that things aren't going the way that the clinging wanted it to go. So anyway, this birth is kind of just a furthering of step number 10 of becoming. 12, aging and death, jara marana, the inevitable aging and death that follow birth, accompanied by sorrow, lamentation, pain, and suffering. So, I mean, in a sense, you could say I become so focused on wanting sushi, and that's what I must have to become happy. This is a funny example. Like, I really, even though I love sushi, I never care this much about sushi. But there are things in life that you do care this much about. Maybe it's love from, your partner, or acceptance from your parents or something, or approval in your career. So anyway, birth, the arising of this new state where you're either in less clinging or more clinging, less craving or more craving. When you're in that moment of intense craving and clinging, you can think that your world revolves around getting that one thing. And as you'll soon see, as you get the thing, let's say you really wanted to have a drink of alcohol, and you have sort of contact, like you have a moment in your perception where maybe you don't feel that well, and then you have a mental formation where you think back to, oh, there was this one time when I drank a bunch of alcohol and partied with my friends, and I felt good for that brief moment in the process. And then you begin to have, the feeling, the Vedana, that, oh, that in the past was pleasant, and what I'm feeling right now in my body is unpleasant. So I begin to have the craving. Oh, it would be nice to have a drink right now. It'd be nice to get drunk right now and go party with my friends. So let's say then that craving to have a drink intensifies and it becomes clinging. And then my mind can't get off the topic of having a drink of alcohol with my friends. So then I call up my friends. I call up my friends on the phone, And John over here and Timothy, that same guy with the funny shoes or whatever we made fun of before, like he says he wants to go to the bar, he'll drink with us. So we all go there, me, John, and Timothy, and we're having a great time. We're drinking. And that that craving for alcohol, which really came from a sense of maybe a poor feeling, a feeling we didn't like, a feeling we thought was unpleasant in the body, it can lead to craving in a certain sense because we think that craving alcohol will get us away from our bad feeling. And then we cling to that idea. It becomes sort of a temporary identity. We seek out the opportunity or whatever, the experience. I would say it's not really a good opportunity to drink alcohol. But anyway, we create that reality. And you could say the step 10, link number 10, becoming, is the process of you going to drink alcohol, more or less. The process of your identity of wanting to drink alcohol and the moment of identity experience where, oh, I'm actively drinking alcohol. Like, that's kind of the becoming process. And then birth, the arising of a new existence, a new moment where you're getting that alcohol, you're drinking it, you're feeling it. And there also can be the link number 12 of aging and death. The inevitable aging and death that follow birth, accompanied by sorrow, lamentation, pain, and suffering. So let's say you drink enough, and then your stomach starts to hurt, and you start to think about your ex, and you start to think about how your dad didn't ever congratulate you when you were a kid or something, or you think about whatever things that come boiling from your subconscious when you drink alcohol, right? It's not always positive. As if you've drank alcohol before enough times, you probably know there are times where you end up in a situation far more negative than you intended to. So anyway, let's say you move down the line and maybe even the buzz from alcohol is beginning to wear off, and now you're just having a hangover. Well, that experience of you craving alcohol, you getting alcohol, you experiencing the sort of high from alcohol, and now you're experiencing the come down from alcohol. So that alcohol experience aged. It came into being. It was born. It lived for a time. It aged. The alcohol wore off in your system. And now the experience of the high of alcohol has died. And because of that whole process, now the high of alcohol has died, and now you're left on the downside. You're left with a hangover, maybe in the morning, and you're feeling horrible. You're regretting your decisions. You have low energy, and you're angry, and you have a headache because you didn't stay hydrated. And because alcohol dehydrates you, you wake up feeling horrible, and then you realize, oh, I have to go to work, but shit, I was drunk. I didn't set my alarm. Now I'm an hour late for work. And now you have some sorrow, you have some lamentation, you have some pain, and you have suffering. So that is one way of understanding kind of dependent origination. Now, how could this all have been avoided? Well, if at step 1 in the chain, if at link 1 in the chain, you didn't have the lack of understanding of the true nature of reality, leading to misconceptions and delusions, you could have felt better or been less kind of impacted by the negative perception, the negative contact, the negative sensory contact that you had. Maybe you had a bad feeling in your body for a moment, and then because of not having ignorance and being so attached to the feeling of yourself and that things must be a certain way, you just had some acceptance, general acceptance, and you weren't that worried about that feeling. And then you had the knowledge that that feeling is going to pass and that it's not much of an issue. And so even though maybe you had the feeling and maybe it created some unpleasant Vedana, some unpleasant feelings came about, you didn't allow craving to occur because you were not under the illusion that following the impulses that a bad feeling can create, you weren't under the illusion that my body feels bad. Now all of a sudden I'm going to go do something that has a short-term mindset that's going to end up costing me later. No, you weren't so caught up in the negative feeling to begin with, and so you didn't even crave any sort of radical solution to it. You just sat with the feeling and it was gone within a minute or two. Like, that's an alternative route. And that's kind of one way that you can understand the 12 links of dependent origination. So, lastly, through the teaching of dependent origination, we can come to understand the terms of emptiness and voidness and how those are used in Buddhism. So, emptiness is, when you hear that word in Buddhism, it's not describing some subject of emptiness, right? Emptiness is not necessarily a noun. Emptiness is a word describing the self, how to view the self nature correctly, how to have right understanding, right? That first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, or how to avoid the first step of the first link of dependent origination, how to avoid being ignorant. When you see emptiness, you understand that emptiness describes the self nature of an object. So some people might see this pair of pliers, right? And they say, this is a real pair of pliers. Well, through dependent origination, you can see, well, there's no set of pliers that doesn't, come to be without this sort of plastic rubbery handle. And there's actually metal that's another piece of those pliers. And without the metal, actually like the metal element, but then the metal being formed and shaped in a certain way and of a certain quality and not broken, like all those conditions are needed for the pliers to come into being as they are, right? So the pliers are not some permanent existing object that's always going to be this way. The pliers are a perception that's occurring within your consciousness that is also changing because of your internal experience, your internal ideas and mental formations about the pliers. So not only are the pliers as a physical object reliant on things being a certain way to maintain their existence, the pliers also maintain their existence by your mind interpreting them and seeing them in a certain way. Someone can see a set of these pliers and think, oh, I don't even know what those pliers are used for. And then I can see these pliers and I can see, okay, these are the pliers that I use to use this wire to wrap around small gemstones. And then through that, I can make a small piece of jewelry. So to me, when I see these pliers, the sensory contact of me actually seeing the pliers arises with my mental formations and memory of what I can use the pliers for, and that actually creates me seeing and valuing a different set of pliers than you would if you didn't have those same sort of past experiences with this type of pliers. So anyway, that was kind of because I had to explain it in the sense of a physical object, it was maybe even a little bit more difficult to get the point across there. Emptiness is describing that there is not a fixed self nature inherent within something. Brandon Rowe is not inherently Brandon Rowe. Brandon Rowe changes every single day. Every instant that I have my direct experience, I have different feelings, I have different sensory input, I have different ideas, different things come to my mind, I have different bodily sensations, but even more so, the cells in my body are regenerating and changing and mutating. Parts of my body are growing and being cut off. My nails are growing. I chop the nail off. It's no longer me, you could say. Well, who was to say that it was part of some permanently existing Brandon Rowe in the first place? It wasn't. So emptiness or voidness is basically seeing that when we talk about a thing or a person or a place or an object, any type of noun in reality, the noun appears the way that the noun does right now because of many, many different factors. And all of those factors can change throughout time. So we need to understand simply that things do not last forever, and that includes identities, that even includes spiritual transcendent ideas and identities such as the soul. The soul, if there is such a thing, it is not going to be found in the transitory, changing, impermanent world of sensory phenomena that we find ourselves in. That is not where the soul is found. And that's what Buddhism teaches, is that you do not find the inherent soul nature of something in this changing world through changing parts of it. You do not apply what is permanent. You do not describe what is permanent by saying it is somehow linked with what is impermanent. The only way you can describe the permanent in a world of pure impermanence is by describing what the permanent soul is not. And that's what the term anatta, or the non-substantiality of self, is about in Buddhism. It's saying the soul is not this pair of pliers. The soul is not Brandon Rowe right now in the temporary expression that he exists. The soul is not this little gemstone thing. The soul is not this. The soul is not that. The soul is not consciousness, because we know, because of the attainment of cessation, that consciousness also is not permanent. This is getting into what emptiness is saying. Emptiness is saying that the world is empty of inherent self-nature. Objects are empty of true, permanent self-nature. Anyway, so this gives a brief overview of the first major set of teachings in Buddhism, and that's the Theravada teachings. You can also hear this, kind of the original teachings of Buddhism spoken of as the Hinayana, also called the first turning of the wheel of Dhamma or Dharma. And beyond that, there's also the Mahayana school, which is seen as the second turning of the wheel of Dhamma. And then there is the Vajrayana, which is mainly the Tibetan teachings, which is seen as the third turning of the wheel of Dharma or Dhamma. So there are still, we've only very barely touched upon some of the general main principles within the original first school of Buddhism. And we still have two other major portions of Buddhism to describe. So if you'd like to hear more descriptions about Buddhism and more Buddhist teachings, or more teachings about different wisdom traditions beyond just Buddhism, that's something that we do a lot of on my channel here. If you would like to hear more about Buddhism, or maybe hear about the Mahayana or Vajrayana, the second and third major portions of Buddhist teachings, if you want me to make a video on these things, just comment below and let me know that you appreciated this one, and or you could even, maybe if you have a question about Buddhism, we could explore that. Even if you'd like to ask a question, I'm happy to answer, even in a video format. If it's a question that would help others to know the answer to as well, or I can at least answer you in a comment. So subscribe if you would like to see more of my channel, obviously. Give this video a thumbs up, a like, if you'd like to support support my channel as a whole, and support the doing of this video, how well this video does on YouTube, to help get this video in front of more people like yourself who would probably value it. And then, comment below for any questions, or just to let me know that you enjoyed this and let me know that you'd like to see more. But commenting also is a great way to support my channel in this video for free, so I'd greatly appreciate any comments or questions that you have. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in another video.